Okay, everyone, let's go ahead and get started. We have CSS resets. And let's go over this documentation. CISO, we can do a workshop if we have time during this lecture time. Are you talking about on position or on the other assignments that we have, like Flex?
Just a general layout workshop.
Okay.
Not during the lecture.
Oh, I was just thinking if we had extra time. Okay. All right, then we'll do a workshop after. All right, so CSS resets. Let me read this for you guys. Different browsers may give different attributes to HTML elements, causing sites to look different based on the version of the browser, or whether we're seeing the site on Internet Explorer, Firefox, Chrome, etc. For example, in Internet Explorer, an H1 element may have certain margin and padding, causing your site to look one way, while Chrome and Firefox may give an H1 a slightly different margin padding. These differences can cause a headache, especially if you're trying to make your site look consistent. So even if you design your page a certain way, it's not going to look consistent unless you have a reset. So let's go over what this means. To solve many cross-browser issues, it's encouraged that you use the reset and normalize and basically define what default attributes should be, instead of relying on default values that come with the browser. In fact, technical recruiters love to ask you about this and see if you know how to make the site look consistent throughout different browsers. When they ask you this, you should be able to explain with confidence what reset and normalizing means and why they are used. You should tell them that in addition to this, it's important to validate your HTML CSS, often as validating the HTML and CSS gives insight on how you can fix issues that may lead to cross-browser compatibility issues. And often invalid HTML CSS can lead to weird behavior as the browser may not fix invalid HTML CSS quite the right way. Okay, so let's go over what a reset means. So the simplest reset that web developers commonly use is to simply zero out the margin and padding for all visible elements on the page. This will make our designs consistent from one browser to another and allows us to specify padding and margin on only the elements where they will be necessary. So let's give an example here. I have an index.html and CSS. Let me just lower the view here. Bring this over. Okay, so I have on my HTML a hello world in an H1 tag. So if I pull this up here, here it is. And if we inspect here, if I hover over with this tool at the top left of the console, wherever it may be, the square with the mouse symbol over it, I can hover over the H1. And as you can see, those yellow bars, there's some margin there. There's 21.44 pixels of margin above and below. So this hello world comes with some additional padding. So what we want to do is set that to 0. And the way we're going to do that is by the wildcard selector and then setting margin and padding to 0. So I'm going to copy this here, add this to my CSS. And now if I pull up my browser, we no longer have that margin. See, now if I look at the box model, margin, there is no margin, no padding, just the dimensions of the H1 itself, the hello world, the main content. And so when we apply CSS resets, we do this using the wildcard at the very top of our CSS. So that way, if we wanted to add margin or padding later on, for example, let's say we later on decided this H1 or all H1s wanted to have a little bit of padding below. So we say padding bottom, 10 pixels. For some reason, we decided that's what we want for all our H1s. Now we can see that. If I can manage pulling it up. And so now, there it is. That green bar tells us we have 10 pixels below of padding. So we initially set it to 0 and allow for edits later on our CSS. Okay, and let's take a look at our platform as to what other resets we can do. This is a basic, simple reset. Setting padding and margin to 0.
We got a question in the chat.
Okay. Can you explain margin, padding, and border real quick as how it applies to functions? Or applies or functions is going forward, I can learn adjust. Okay, so let's do, I guess, a refresher on what margin and padding are. I'm going to add an H2 below and say, hello, universe. Okay. Thank you, Keith and Justin. So let's go ahead and see this without the reset. And I'm going to say, actually, H1, I'm going to say background color of forest green, and our H2s are going to have background color of Rebecca purple. Okay. So if I use this inspect tool and I hover over our hello world, margin is the space. It's this invisible space connected to our H1 tag above and below. This is the default margin given to all H1s, visible on Chrome specifically. This H2 also has its own margin. It's 19.920 and 19.920 below. And I'll do a refresh on why these margins are not conflicting, why they're not stacking on top of each other. But just know that that is the space given outside of the tag that we're working with. So margin is the space outside. It's like an aura, if you can imagine what that would be like. It's this magical force field that it has outside. Okay, padding would be the space that you have inside your body. All right, so let's add some padding. I'm going to say to this H1, padding bottom and padding top. 20 pixels above and below. See now how much green space has been added? It's like our H1 just gained some weight. So it added some padding. Okay, so let me just comment this out. This is without padding. This is with padding. I can add it as well to our H2. Oops. And our H2 will increase in size as well. Now, if I wanted to add some extra margin to our H1, if I say margin top 20 pixels, margin bottom 20 pixels, let's make it 30. Now you can see the white space has increased. So without margin top, and this is the default margin it has. So now I'm going to apply this CSS reset. This is going to set everything to 0, margin and padding to 0, unless I go ahead and edit it on later lines. So without anything at all, this is what our page would look like, completely reset. Now padding to the H1 gains some weight. It's a little bit thicker now. If I add some margin, now it has this force field around it. It still belongs to that H1. So it's still part of it, but it's this invisible section here that doesn't have any color. Does that answer it, Justin?
Yes, it does. Thanks, Josh.
Okay, great. And for anyone else that forgot as well, that's what we're working with. So when we set it to 0 initially, we're taking away that initial default margin and padding that any tag may have. And we're setting the rules ourselves. Okay. There's more than one type of CSS reset. Here's a website that we can explore on our own time. And it has a lot of explanation to different types of reset. This is a minimalistic reset, padding 0 and margin 0. This one also sets the border to 0. So border is another attribute of our box model. See, in our box model here, we have padding on the innermost section, margins on the out. Border, we can increase as well. Remember when we, for example, let's add some border to the H1. So border top 20 pixels, solid red. So now the border is the area between the margin and the padding.
Hey, Josh, if we wanted to, can we think of margin as being applied to outside the main box of the content, and then border being, well, not the inside box of the content, that's the wrong word. So you have hello world right there. And let's say that's like a force, the green part, the part that's green, that's a force field.
So let me do an analogy. I think I know what
I was wanting to say, can we think of margin as a rule of thumb? Can we think of margin as outside of that box and padding for inside? Because padding makes the green bigger, and then margin makes that outside of the green bigger. Even though that's all, I still see it as one whole box. So if I'm confusing everybody, just tune me out. You see, you have this whole from the start of the web page to the top of Hello Universe. I recognize that as one thing. Right?
Yes, exactly.
But could we say that the margin is for outside of that green, and padding is for the inside of it, since it makes the green bigger? Or am I still looking at it wrong?
No, you've got it. You've got it.
Okay.
Imagine this is like your house or property. Here's a fence that you have. The border is like a fence.
Okay.
And the green is all everything inside your fence. So you can still increase the width of the fence itself. So that's your border.
Okay.
And then the outside space, the margin, is like maybe the sidewalk.
Okay, your property line.
Yeah, it's still within your property. People can walk, it's not technically inside. So if you increase it, the green is still going to stay the same.
Right.
But it belongs to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are you saying, CISO?
So
Oh,
CISO has some analogies as well. Let's see what he says. Margin is like the force field. Border is like the perimeter, and the padding is the internal.
okay. Margin force. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Right. Okay, so now, where were we? CSS resets. You can reset the border to zero as well. This is another reset. You can set the outline as well to 0. And then there's lots of resets that we can get into. So what was the one you said by Josh? What's his name? If you can link that. You said
Yes, they're in the chat. Josh Como and Eric Meyer are the most famous resets.
Josh Cuomo reset.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't go over what before and after means, but here's a useful link for you guys.
Yeah, but it really goes in depth in explaining what it's doing. The one by Eric Meyer is a little long in the tooth, so I linked the 2.0 version. If you Google Eric Meyer reset, you'll see his original with all the explanation.
Okay. So this is a way to control your CSS rules on all browsers, so it's consistent styling whatever you're adding to your page, right?
Yeah, and you can have as many style sheets as you want linked to your HTML, right? So you wouldn't normally just put all of this CSS in your CSS file. You would just link to another one.
Okay. Fantastic. So you guys are not ignorant of what this is. This is what a CSS reset does. Okay. If you're wondering how come there's extra space when I didn't add it, I'm trying to make this H1 appear without some margin. It's because you didn't reset it. So instead of applying it to each H1 or each property of any tag that has extra margin, just set them all to 0 to begin with, and then work from that. Okay, let's give a level of understanding. Pulse check 1 to 10, how we feel about resets.
So is that more or less how we should start all our style CSS from now on?
Yeah, start with this. Padding and margin. Make a good habit of setting that to 0. It's just going to save you a headache of having to do it later on when you're styling a page. Are CSS resets public domain, Narciso? I'm sure they are, right? I mean, that's why they're available.
Yeah, they just, attribute them if you like.
You can add a little comment there, borrowed from Eric Meyer or Josh Cuomo, if you'd like.
Yeah, Eric Myers is probably on tens of millions of websites.
Okay. What about box container? Box container, I think we should do that in the workshop. We should explain that because that goes a little bit off the point of the lecture here. I think he means box property.
Oh, box model?
Yeah, it's that. Sorry, box model. Okay. So we'll get to that, Justin. Let's just move along to get to position because we're already about 20 minutes in here, and that would take a little bit longer to explain. I'd have to have an example ready. Okay. So we're going to learn about position today, what it does, when not to use it, which is most of the time, and when we can use it. So there's 3 rules we're going to learn about: position absolute, position relative, and position fixed. So let's pull up the meaning of these rules here on W3 Schools. So if you go to W3 Schools, we're going to go through each one here. I like this website. It had some good definitions as well. Okay, so I'm taking some code from this example here. I have more than one example to show you guys how each of the position properties work. Okay, so I've already copied this code. It's just a bunch of lorem ipsum tags, and at the top there's this pop-up looking div box here with a button in it, and that's what we're going to be applying position to. So if you want to try this for yourself, you can copy along, or I'll have this code available on GitHub as well. And here's the CSS. So let me pull this up. Okay, I have this code here already. So let's view this. I'm going to just double check everything looks good. Okay, yeah. And here it is. Here's our page. I've made no edits to it. This is just what it looks like initially to start. Okay, and I'm going to be going over each of the position rules and what they do. So let's go over these positions here. The first one we want to do is position absolute. So let's read what this does. Here we are on position absolute. And let's read here what the general rule for position is. The position property specifies the type of positioning method used for an element. There's these 4 here, but we're going to just go over absolute, relative, and fixed. Actually, there's 5. Just these 3 here. Okay, so absolute, what does it do? The element is positioned relative to its first position, not static element. So what we're going to be manipulating here is this I'm an alert pop-up. And so, oh, wrong text editor here. Let me close this. This is the one we want. So this one here, this div called message with the ID message is what we're going to be changing here. So I'm going to uncomment this here, and I'm going to say absolute. Let's see what it does when I apply the rule by itself here. Okay, initially, it doesn't move anything. But if I say now from the left, 250 pixels.
It looked like it overtook the text at first, didn't it? When you had just, okay.
Did it? Maybe I missed that. Yes. Okay. So this is without any rule. So let's see this happen in live time. Yes,
Okay.
it did. Good eye. Yep. It just went right over my head here. So this position absolute, let's see what this says in relation to the rule here. The element is positioned to relative to its first position, not static ancestor element. So everything just got moved up. This stays here where it was before. And it's as if the page behind it is ignored. I have more than one example here so we can see this better than just having text, but let's see what it looks like when I apply some left to it. Now it moves to the left 150 pixels. If I say top and left, it just moved down. All right, let's play with this a little bit more. I'm going to say now from the top 400 pixels, and now it's moved from its original position down 400 pixels. Okay, now let's say bottom. $200 pixels. I have from the bottom 200 pixels and from the left 250 pixels. So let's inspect this here. It just didn't refresh. So now it's moved up from the bottom 200 pixels and it's moved to the left from its original position. Okay, so now let's see this in another view. Let's see this in another view. I'm going to pull up this folder. And I am going to show this here. This one's a little bit easier to understand. Here I have 3 boxes. Okay, I have a container div, and then I have div box 1, div box 2, and div box 3. And for CSS, all I've done is add height, width, and margin. And I'm going to start changing the position of this pink one here. So I'm going to change this to absolute. And as you can see here, now we have a change. So what's happened here? When I add absolute, it's as if the green box disappears. The green box is still there, but now this pink box has overlapped it. All right, and why is this? The position CSS property here, or does it say what absolute does? No, it doesn't. I have to go here. The element is positioned relative to its first position ancestor element. So relative to its first position ancestor. Who's the ancestor of box 2? It's the container. So in this container, it's going to move relative to where it was. Okay. Now let's try to add some left in addition to absolute. The container is not positioned. The container has a display flex, so that's why everything is lined up as it is.
Right, so then it's not positioned relative to the container, it's positioned relative to the body.
So why wouldn't it be positioned relative to the container?
Because the container is static. If it doesn't have a position, then it's static.
Okay. So is that because that's display flex?
Just because we haven't explicitly said that it is positioned.
Okay,
Right.
but I'm just
You-
moving the pink one here.
Right, it's now relative to the body,
Okay.
not the container, because the container isn't positioned.
Okay. All right, so let me continue on here. I'm not sure exactly what you mean there, so I'll have to
Cool.
bother you later about that. Okay, so now let me just add some left here. 250 pixels left with position absolute. Okay, now the pink one moves all the way to the right here. So this green one and this blue one, let's see what it looks like without position and absolute. Position absolute and left. It's in the middle here. When we add position absolute, it moves over its neighbor here. And if I move it to the left now, it's going to, from the left 250 pixels. If we see the green now, we see the blue, it's not overlapping anything. And it's now on the rightmost position.
So
Okay.
before, did it push that green square out or did it overtake that square? Was it over top of it?
It was over the top of it.
Okay.
Just like when we saw here, when we applied position absolute to this pop-up here, it moved on top of the text. So now we can move it on top of other elements relative to where it was originally. Position relative to its first position ancestor. Okay, we'll get a better understanding as we compare here what this does in relation to fixed and relative here. So without it, pink is in the middle. I've applied it. And if I inspect here, I'm not going to be able to highlight the green one.
You can change the index of pink to see the green.
I don't usually use Z index, but let's see. Z index.
Just -1 will do it probably.
So Z index pushes it to the back. And the green is still there. Now just the Z index gives this pink box, it moves it to the background. The pink box is still there, but its priority of where it is in relation to, like if we have an X and Y graph, the Z graph is the third dimension pointing toward us. We're saying move this pink box to the back. And if I say from the left, 250 pixels, now it's moving 250 pixels from the left. If I say 150, now it's overlapping the blue, but 200, now it's 150 from the left. Let's say 50. And now it's overlapping both. 0. Okay. Now what if I say from the top 40 pixels? Now I've added to the top 40 pixels. So now you can see how you can move any div across the page anywhere. From this position where the green one, where it was overlapping, now I've moved it this way from the left and from the top 100 pixels. Okay, so let's take away position absolute. Let's go over another rule, and then we'll do a status check here. I'm going to now, what's the next one here? Position relative. So let's see what this means here. The element is positioned relative to its normal position. So let's see what that means. Relative to its normal position. So the pink here, I'm going to say now relative, position relative. By itself, let's see what it does. Doesn't move at all, does it? Now we say from the left, 250 pixels. And relative to its original position, where it was before anything has touched it, it's going to move 250 from the left. Now from the top, 100 pixels, it's there. So moving things, adding from the left, adding to the left and adding to the top, it works the same as absolute, except when we used absolute, it's as if this pink box didn't exist. Everything shifts over, ignores what this pink box was doing, what it was there, taking up that space before. And we can still move it around from the left and from the top, but its neighbors have shifted over as if that space there is no longer occupied. Okay, let's go over one more here. The next one was fixed. So let's use position fixed. Let's read the rule there. The element is positioned relative to the browser window. So now let's comment out these rules here. And I have position fixed. So this is where it is. If I apply fixed to it, it's now relative to the browser window. So this blue one shifts over into the pink one spot as if it didn't exist, like absolute. The pink one is going to overlap this green one. And we say from the left, let's do this here. Now from the left of the browser window, move 250 pixels. From the top of the browser window, move 100 pixels. Okay, let's see this in action with our other view here. So let's move let's load this here. This was our page with absolute. So let's go ahead and change this. Now we're going to move this this box using fixed. Fixed from the left, 250, and 200 from the bottom. So from the bottom of this here, it's 200. And why is that? It's because fixed is positioned relative to the browser window. So now it's adjusting itself from the browser window. We're saying from the bottom, go up 250 pixels, from the left 250 pixels. So that's why it's down here. We're positioning it from the bottom now. If we say from the top,
Can you
Now it's-
scroll down too, Josh?
Yes. Did you want to see it on the bottom again?
Either way.
Okay. This is the pop-up box positioned from the top 200 pixels and from the left 250 pixels. If I change the view of my browser, the pop-up stays in the same place. That's because it's fixed relative to the browser. So this is always going to be 250 pixels left from the view of the browser and 200 pixels from the top of the browser. If I say, let's say 400 from the top, I can squish my browser from the top, and it's always going to be 400 from the top. From right here, let me annotate the screen. From here to here, 400 pixels. That's not visible. 400. Okay. And from here to here, from the left, that's going to be 250. So if I drag this from the left, it's going to stay 250 from the left. So this is fixed. Do you guys see that? I can keep dragging it, squish the whole thing. The pop-up's now not going to be so visible. But it's always going to be 250 from the left and 400 from the top.
Can you scroll down the content? Yeah.
Yes, so no matter how much I scroll. So imagine this fixed is like when you want to create a pop-up. Sometimes when you go on a browser, the browser will ask if you would like to subscribe to a newsletter, enter your email in order to continue. And no matter where you scroll on the page, this pop-up is always going to be there. This is an instance where you would use fixed. Or let's say you have a message at the bottom here. Let's say from the bottom. Let me clear here. From the bottom, we'll say we want it 20 pixels. This will be like a cookie acknowledgement. Anywhere you go on the page, it's going to say, hey, we're going to give you, we're going to ask that you submit your cookies. We're going to keep track of your cookies. That's what you see there when you go in a browser. Okay, let's give a pulse check on how we understand fixed. Okay, we're going to go over the other rules here once more. So fixed says, I'm going to take priority over everything else on the screen in the Z index. And no matter where you tell me to scroll, I'm always going to be that position from wherever you define it. From the bottom, you can say from the bottom 20 pixels. That's why it's such a short gap there. So I can squish it up and down. It's always going to be 20 pixels from the bottom. And from the left, it's always going to be 250. Let's view it on here now. If I move my browser, oh, this thing is so short that but this is fixed as well. From the top and from the left. It's a little bit easier to understand on this one here. Okay, let's go back to the squares and understand relative. Okay. Before I style it, who can tell me what relative does again? Who can describe it?
Positions based off of set parameters from where it was originally itself.
Right. So here we have the pink box. Let me just move this here. Minimize this. Here we have the pink box. And now we're going to set it to relative. Initially, it doesn't go anywhere. But if I say, I want you to be relative from your original position, now to the left, 250 pixels. If I say left, 250.
And that
It's-
original position is just going to be wherever the position, its default position, wherever it just gets placed by writing your code the way what you did.
Exactly. Exactly. So in this case, we said box 2 is going to be the second one. We have box 1, box 2, box 3. So box 2 is going to take up this middle space. This middle space is still honored. So this blue square is not going to move over to the pink square spot. It's going to honor that position it was already given. There's still that gap there, but I can move this relative to where it was. So now I can say from the top of where it originally was, I'm going to say 250 pixels. Now it's moved from the top 250 pixels.
So you won't be able to put anything in its original position then?
Right.
Okay.
How would we do that to put it
You
in
have
its?
You have to just change the position, right? Position type, right?
Yeah.
Use something else, position absolute to put
Yeah.
it in the space of that relative space and it would plaster it on top.
Right. So we would use absolute in this case. Absolute, its original position is not going to be honored. So before we move to absolute, let's get a status check on relative. From a pulse check 1 through 10, how well do we understand relative? Yeah, so relative, it's going to honor its original position, but we can still move it from the top and from the left, or right and from the bottom, wherever we'd like. We can say bottom 20 pixels. Let's see what that looks like. From the bottom, we're going to move it up now. Now it's going off the screen. Okay, now we're just moving it left. Now let's do absolute again. Yes, Mike, good point. I'm going to go over that point in just a minute. Absolute, I'm moving it to the left, 250 pixels. And the blue scoots over to where the pink was because its original position is no longer honored. So if I take off from the left, 250, it's going to overlap the green. It's not going to honor the green space either. The green is still there, but without moving it from the left 250 pixels, it's going to overlap the green and the blue is going to scoot over to where the pink originally was. So there's no honor here. So the blue scoots over to the original position, the pink overlaps the green, and that's how that works. Now, the issue with this is that if you start positioning divs all over your web page based on relative, fixed, absolute, Then you have to move every other div that's surrounding it relative to where you originally positioned the first absolute, relative, or fixed position. So it just becomes this game of guessing. Oh, wait, what was the original position of the one that I used position on? And then you are making adjustments, and then you'll get yourself in a really tight knot that you can't figure out how to move something over something else, and everything else has to be relative to that original div that you used position on. It'll seem like a shortcut to begin with when you can't get that div to align itself properly, but then you'll realize, wait a minute, this other div that I was supposed to have under it or beside it, it's not where that is supposed to be originally, so I'm going to have to add some position to that, and then the whole page becomes based off position, and it just looks like a mess. And when you change your browser view type, or you squish your browser, especially if you used fixed, because fixed is relative to the browser, everything is just going to crumple over itself. So there's very few instances where you want to use the position rule. For fixed, it's like if you have a pop-up over your screen that you want the readers or the users to view and to acknowledge before they go into the website. So this is a good example of fixed. Wherever you scroll, there it's going to be. You have to deal with it. Generally, yes, for pop-ups only. Yeah, don't use them, even though it seems like an easy way to move things around. It's like, why would I have to use flex? Why would I have to use inline block when I can just tell it, oh, from the window view, I want you to go relative left 200, from the top 200. But then as you change the browser view, it's just going to change its position as well, and everything else. That goes for absolute and fixed. So there's very few instances. And now let's go over what instances we may use some of the other rules besides fixed. So let's go here and look at our user card. See this image here, this profile image? It's straddling this blue area behind it and this card area as well, this white part of the card area. How can we make it, if we made it to be in this div originally in this position, how can we make it then go into two divs at the same time?
The position as absolute.
Right. If we place it up here and say, from your original position, I want you to go from the top 40 pixels.
Yeah.
Then it will overlap this white section below and this blue section at the same time. But you'll notice if you move it, if you place it in this white area and you say from the top, go move it or move it up, then this area will no longer be so available. You're going to have to adjust by position these to move it up. So I advise when you're working on this project, this assignment, place the profile image in the blue and use position on it from the blue area, not from the white.
So you said put that profile picture within the div of the blue?
Yes, in the div area where the background is blue, use it from this area, not in the white area. Don't start with it here.
Then position it down using absolute position.
Right.
Pixels. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Experiment with all of them, not fixed, because fixed is going to be from the browser. Try absolute, try relative. See the difference between both.
websites do use this, like Facebook uses it. Do they use position to get that result?
I'm not sure which part of Facebook you're talking about exactly.
Don't they have like a profile picture and then the background to it, and it's kind of like the same setup more or less?
Yeah,
don't-
probably.
Probably, yeah. I don't remember. I haven't been on Facebook in a while.
This looks more like LinkedIn, but I definitely think so, yeah. Because like at least on the web version, anyways, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but you got to remember that absolutely positioned elements are positioned relative to their closest positioned ancestor. So, rule of thumb, if you're absolutely positioning an element, you better relatively position its parent.
That makes sense.
Okay. Could you also apply overflow in that scenario? For scrolling, overflow is for when a div box in that it's when a div is containing another div that is too big for its area, then you have to scroll to see all its contents. So what do you mean? Could you apply overflow?
Like could you use overflow so that icon overflows into the bottom div, or no?
I guess I'd have to see it to understand it.
Yeah,
Okay.
you might be able to use overflow visible. Right? You could use it for scroll bars, and you could use it to hide or show elements that overflow.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Now for this lesson here, I think this is better for this afternoon's tutorial. What this is going to do is when you look at a web page, you're going to want to divide it into sections, and Narciso will go over this with you guys in the afternoon. But for example, here, we're going to want to say, okay, I'm going to create this nav bar section, create this logo here, create these list of links, maybe this one as well in its own section, and how to divide up the page exactly like we did the artist replica yesterday. We had to cut it up into pieces and decide how we were going to attack the view of the page or layer of boxes. So this is more of this afternoon's lecture, but I just wanted to let you know what this was about.
Hey Josh,
Yes.
you know how if you could be on this page right here and you clicked Walmart and it would send you back to the home page, would that be an A tag just within that?
Yeah, well,
Type of-
that could be a way to do that, but you would most likely use JavaScript to do that.
Okay. I'll wait then.
Yeah. So we'll go over how to make anything clickable, not just an A
Okay.
tag, to give it some functionality. So this is more like an image. So we can make an image clickable to go somewhere. Anything is clickable, but that's more of another lesson here.
Okay. I was just curious.
So we went through all these position rules to let you know, use it sparingly. Okay, don't abuse it. Fixed is for pop-ups, remember. Relative, the space will be honored. Absolute, the space will not be honored, and whatever you apply absolute to will not honor the space around it either. Okay, so with these three rules, be very careful. If, for example, on the test, you use position other than where the test may indicate it's okay, there may be some sort of cookies pop up on your test. If you're using it besides that, then you're going to get marked down. It's not a rule that you want to use for yourself. We're going to enforce using flex. You can also use inline block, but flex is the preferred way because inline block, you have to adjust your HTML so that there's no gaps. Okay. So do we have any questions about this? I know this concept could be a little bit abstract, so let me go ahead and quiz you guys one more time. All right. Position fixed. How does that work? Either type it in the chat or say it out loud.
Gonna fix its position, commonly used for pop-ups.
Yeah.
Right?
It fixes it on the web page to where you won't be able to move it anywhere else, regardless if you scroll up or down.
Yes, relative to the window.
Yeah, to the window. That's a good way to put it. Relative is to the page, to the web page.
Relative is from its original position. Do we remember that?
Oh, okay. Or that was fixed is to the web page.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, relative from its original position. Yeah.
Yes, and its original position gets honored.
Yes.
And absolute, what does absolute do?
And then absolute, it does not honor its original position.
Right. And it does not honor anybody else's position, and its original position is not honored.
Okay. Nor does it honors anyone else's position. Okay.
Right. Okay. Well, that pretty much wraps up today's lesson. Let's go back to the calendar and remind ourselves what we have to do today. Today, we are going to finish profile page and user card. On user card, we already saw we're going to use a position. And profile page, let's look at what that looks like as well. This is a core assignment. This will be something like the test.
Ooh.
All right. So besides the obvious point here where this profile image is moved down into straddling two areas, use flex for everything else. Okay. So this is a good practice for you guys.
That's not too bad.
Now, what else do we have for today? The homework is read the introduction to functions, Node.js, conditionals, loops, debugging arrays, variables, types, and operators. Because tomorrow we're going to be going over JavaScripts and using JavaScript on our web page, for example, to make a pop-up window disappear or to make a pop-up window appear. So it's going to be cool. We're going to make the page come alive with JavaScript. So get ready for that. Again, Narciso is going to be your instructor for this afternoon's demo, but I will be back in time, or I should be back in time for code reviews. I'll keep you guys updated if for some reason I'm running late. But code reviews are still on. So if you go on here on the calendar, you should be able to select the time you'd like to see your code review. It's now editable, so you can go into here, choose 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. You just have to do it sometime before next Wednesday. Any slot here from today until Tuesday is going to be available, 3 and 4. All right. And so if we have no other questions, we'll go ahead and end the lecture.
You're not allowed on the drive.
And at 12 Mountain, I'll be doing that workshop if you guys want to join.
Nothing.
It'll
Oh,
be in
no,
my-
three places.
Okay.
It'll be in my-
Thank you, Narciso.
Mountain.
Or I can watch it.
It'll be in my room, my breakout room.
Okay.
Thanks.
Cool. So I'll stop the recording and I'll create the breakout rooms right now.
Hey, so what was that workshop on?